Hello chess family, it's me, National Master Jesse James, and today we're on rule number 24. The easiest endgames to win are king and pawn endgames. I really love this game. I wouldn't say I was a endgame lover at first, but after studying it and going over so many games, this is a beautiful game of endgame technique. Let's see how Morphy is able to take, just tear apart his opponent in this very simple and elegant endgame. Here we go. We start off with e4, e5, knight f3, d6, d4. We've got the Philidor's defense over here. E takes d4, queen takes d4. Almost looking like a scotch over here. Knight f6 and e5. And this is a very interesting move here for Morphy to play. Most people would not think of Morphy whenever they think of endgames, but he definitely has some skill here. And this is going to go ahead and force the endgame to happen right away. Of course, Black's best move was not to take here. Many other good moves here for him, but whenever you're playing against an aggressive chess player, especially one known for their middle game skill, you definitely want to take them to endgame every once in a while and make sure that they still have the rights to be a strong chess player, not only in the middle game, but also in the endgame. So, pawn took, and of course, White has only one good move. We're going to go ahead and trade queens here. If you do try to play something like queen takes on e5 check, there's many ways for Black to get equality. Queen e7 is one try, although of course the best move is just going to be bishop e7, saying I'm just going to get a castle, and then after I castle I'll bring the rook over here, and what's your queen doing out here? Plus, the other thing I want to point out is after the queen takes on e5, this is just a symmetrical position, meaning it's just the same here with the pawn structure. The only difference and the only way that either side can say that they have an advantage is due to the piece development. And right now, Black is going to have better piece development with already 3 pieces out, and Black is already ready to castle. So White would be down here definitely. All right, so queen takes d8 check, king takes d8. For most games, especially if, like, I would say even 2 masters playing, even grandmasters, these games are not over just because you lost the right to castle, okay? This is still a very even game. Again, once knight takes on e5 gets played, the pawn structure is pretty much symmetrical. It's really going to be a lot about precision here, again, with just the development. But knight takes on e5 here. Knight takes f7 check, winning. The rook is being threatened, so simple chess. We go ahead and play bishop e6. Knight c3, developing knights before bishops. Bishop d6, developing the knight. Or I should move this knight too. Remember, try to make a threat here. A lot of these moves, I'll kind of go through them kind of fast, but just really try to appreciate and understand what each move does. Again, not every move is trying to plan for the end game or trying to win in 40 moves. Some of them we're just trying to put our pieces to good squares. For instance, this next move is very simple. Hopefully you found it. Just knight c4. The knight moves to attack the bishop. Of course, we know that bishops are worth a little bit more than knights, especially in endgames where the pawns are being traded more because the bishops will have more scope to them. Well, a nice move here, threatening to take. Black did not like this as much, so bishop takes on c4, bishop takes c4. Now White can claim a small plus because of the bishop pair. Rook e8 check, and bishop to e3. A nice move here. And Black plays an interesting idea, king to e7. What's Black planning here? Well, Black does not like the king in the center here, so he's trying to get his king back to f8, trying to castle by hand. I wouldn't say this is necessarily the best thing to do, but I definitely understand the reasoning for it. This does allow Morphy to keep grabbing a bigger advantage. What do you play here as White? Remember, after every move, ask yourself, what is my opponent's threat? And always try to guess your opponent's move here. Simple chess, I want to keep developing my pieces, so should we go kingside or queenside? Of course, we're going to be going queenside. Hopefully you went to the right way. There's definitely nothing wrong with going kingside, but I will go ahead and say this to you. When you castle queenside, you get your rook on an open file, and your king is a little bit closer to the center. Rather vice versa, whenever you castle here, your king is 2 squares away from the center, and your rook is not doing too much over here. I think the ideal placement for your rooks is going to be on e1, the f rook, and then the a rook going to d1. And you can see here, again, just slightly better pluses here. The king's already closer to the center, and the rook is already on d. All we got to do is get our rook to e1, and it's going to be the ideal setup for White. Alright, let's keep moving forward. a6 gets played. What's my opponent's threat? Definitely looking at trying to push the pawns over here on the queen side. This is something that you would definitely like because, well, the further your opponent's pawns are pushed, the weaker they can become. So Morphy just keeps chucking along, keep making threats. Keep bettering your pieces. Help your pieces so they can help you. Definitely one of my favorite quotes by Morphy. Bishop g5, making a very nice threat now. Can you see the idea? Simple chess. I just want to play knight to d5 check, attacking the king and also the knight. With that move right there, I will be giving my opponent double pawns, or even worse, in some variations, even losing material. Knight to d7, and look at this fine move. What do you play here? A lot of people are still looking at knight d5 check. This move is okay, but since the knight is over here, maybe not the best. Morphy plays the top computer move and goes ahead and plays knight to e4. Not only does he put pressure on the pinned knight, but here the real threat is to take on d6. Here, not only will this give us the full bishop pair, but also giving us one of the 3 different types of pawn weaknesses. Hopefully you remember that the 3 different types of pawn weaknesses. If not, you can go and look at the bottom. I'll post that link to it. All right, let's keep going. Pawn to h6, bishop takes on f6, knight takes on f6, and knight takes on d6. Now this may be very weird to some people because, hey, we just gave away our bishop pair. But what did we get out of this? Remember, just having the bishop pair alone does not win a chess game. You've got to try and convert it to an actual win or a materialistic win, winning your opponent's pieces. With that being said, we now have a new good threat against our opponent. What's our opponent's weakness in this position? You should always be asking yourself, where is my opponent's weaknesses? And here, what do we get out of this? Well, now we have the isolated pawn. This is definitely going to be a very big weakness for the rest of the game. And also, we actually go into a plus position, or a better position, because it's bishop and rook versus knight and rook. This is one of those known facts by strong chess players. Bishop and rook will work together better than a knight and a rook. All right, well, let's keep chucking ahead. Rook check, king f8, rook takes, knight takes. Forced move here. There was no way to actually win the d6 pawn here because, well, if you do try to grab the pawn after d6, they just take, right? So you play the check here, king goes back, and again, you can't take on d6 right away because then your rook would just be in pre. So rook takes, and then they have this nice move, knight takes on e8. Again, we keep making progress in this position. Bishop and rook versus the knight and rook. And again, we see that this isolated d pawn is here. Notice how Morphy is going to slowly just start bettering his pieces and making easy threats. When you're playing against a strong player, they do not make weaknesses. So you have to provoke them or keep pushing them. Keep making simple ideas, simple attacks against them, and whenever they defend, they're going to start creating weaknesses. And Morphy is a master at this. Bishop d5, nice and simple, putting pressure on these queenside pawns over here. Bishop takes on b7 as a threat. Black has to play this silly looking move, rook to b8. Definitely the rook does not want to be there. Let's keep bettering the position. Bishop back to f3. This allows the rook opened up, meaning this knight can't move anywhere. So g6 gets played. Not a very good move. I'm not too sure why Daniel decided to do this. Pawn c3, a very good move. What does this move do? Ask yourself, why did c3 get played? Or better yet, why did c4 not get played? Doesn't c4 grab more space and then also make this pawn on d6 a backwards pawn? Alright, feel free to press pause if you want to. Alright, why was c3 better than playing c4? And what did this c3 pawn move do? Well, when you're analyzing this position right here, you'll see that we have 3 pawns over here versus 3. This is not going to be a good place to try and push for your advantage because, well, in endgames we should be trying to win our opponent's pawns and also try to make pass pawns. 3 versus 3 means even trades, nothing's going to happen there. You don't get a pass pawn. The queen side is going to be your best place for it. Why? You have the 3 pawns versus these broken pawn islands over here. There's 2 over here, which we can put pressure on, and this isolated one over here, definitely the biggest pawn weakness in the game. So the idea of c3 is allowing the king to start running upward later on in the game. The king would love to get to b6 here, as the b7 pawn would just fall. So why not go to c4? Well, we might be going to d5 too, or maybe even over to d4, and this pawn can get in our way. So a very mature move by Morphy here. Alright, let's keep moving forward. Kings must be active in the endgame. King e7 gets played. Nice harassment here. Rook e1 check. King back to f8. The king probably looks better trying to run over to the d7 square, doesn't it? Why not go to d7? After king to d7, bishop to d5. And this pawn now looks a little bit weak here, and it's really hard to defend. If you push the pawn forward, a new weak square has just been made, the light squares. And here, white already has a good advantage. Bishop e6 check, I guess king c7, and now bishop f7 winning a pawn. Be careful. Weak squares are still very important in the endgame. So king to f8 got played. King c2, the king march has begun. Morphy has both his bishop and rook at its best places. Now it's time for the king to activate. Knight c7 gets played. Not a bad idea. Where's the knight going to? Quite a few good squares. Knight going to e6 will allow the king access back into e7 over here so we can defend the pawn. Also, maybe the knight can control some good central squares here too. All right, king b3. We know the idea. The king is trying to get access to this b6 square. If he can get over here, he's going to put very good pressure on the b7 pawn. Black needs to combat this. Knight to e6. King to a4. a5, b6. Here I come. Pawn to b6. The only way to start the blockade over here for black. Well, that plan has gone bad. What do we do now? Black does have a certain annoying move here. Do you see it? Hopefully you see it. It's knight c5 check. How do we better our position, keep moving forward, and stop our opponent's threats? Simple chess. Pawn to b4. We're going to start pushing these pawns forward anyways. b4 goes ahead and grabs this control over this c5 square. All right, here we go. Pawn to h5. And now a very nice move, h4. Why is this a good move? Well, the very basics in endgames is whenever you have a bishop, always look about where the pawns are placed. Because this is a light square bishop, Morphy now has stalemated these pawns over here on the light squares. Now this is good for him because the bishop at some point might be able to attack him. So, good rule of thumb, anytime you're in these endgames and your opponent has a bishop of one color, put all your pieces to the opposite. You don't have to worry about as many skewers, pins, or any other kind of hanky-panky stuff. All right, black keeps trying to make progress over here. King e7 running toward the center. Rook e3, a nice move here. The Capablanca rook going on top of the pawns, being able to slide over to each side. King to d7. Bishop to d5. A nice little move here. This not only puts the question to the knight that the bishop might take, but just keeps adding pressure. Even though we may not take, this is going to go ahead and take away your opponent's time because they have to think and keep analyzing each move. Is the bishop taking now a good idea? Is the bishop taking now? Each move they have to start calculating these ideas. Rook e8 gets played. King to b3. Of course, we're not in any rush over here. The bishop takes on e6, or bishop trading knight, is not waiting for us just yet. Remember, the bishop and rook work better than the rook and the knight. We're just adding on that very nice pressure to our opponent. The threat is stronger than the execution. Another very good quote for chess players. Rook to g8. And rook to f3. Simple chess attacking f7. Yes, I do know that the king can simply defend it, but this also brings the king further away from the queen side, which is our real threat of the game, or a big plan of the game. King e7, a4, of course, a5, and this is definitely a mistake here because now you've given your opponent the penetration square. What's the penetration square? Simply, were you able to penetrate or get through your opponent's position? When a5 got played, where is the penetration square? Simple chess. It's the b5 square. Now you see the king c4, king b5 can get played. And here, Morphy is going to go ahead and symbolize the game, or just try and trade down to make the game easier to understand. Bishop takes, king takes. Interesting move here. Most people here would probably be looking at playing f takes on e6, and this is probably the right route to do. You have two candidate passed pawns, maybe one can get across. Not too sure why king takes e6 was played, but it got played. King takes on e6. King c4. You see the king is running up to get to that penetration square and put pressure on these two pawns. Pawn to g5. I want to go ahead and point out real quick, if your idea is maybe we should trade here, it's not the best, as what you're doing here is now simplifying the position again and allowing white to have a candidate passed pawn. Remember, a candidate passed pawn is a pawn that can move forward with being captured, but it also can be defended here. I mean, that's a protected one, but a candidate passed pawn has no pawn in front of it, but it can still be captured. Here, a5, of course, just helps white to make their true passed pawn, which is a passed pawn is a pawn that can move forward without no pawn attacking it. All right, so g5 got played. Black is trying to create as much counterplay as possible. What's the idea? Very simple. In that perfect world of his, Morphy will take because he's not thinking ahead. Rook takes on g5. And then you can see that the rook gets a little bit more active here, but really the idea is to cut off the king. Here, black has already achieved equality because of this little, this little bit of a mistake. Now, when I say equality, maybe that's a little too strong. He's at least cut off white for this instance. Because the pawns are all scattered around here with 1, 2, 3, 4 different pawn islands. 1, 2, 3, 4 different pawn islands, and white only has 2. White definitely still has an edge here. But, again, this helps out black's position quite a bit. Alright, back to the position. Morphy has gone ahead so fast, he doesn't even need to worry about this. King b5. Pawn takes, pawn takes. Pawn takes on h4. And simple chess, we just go ahead and take here on b6. Now we have 2 passed pawns over here. Yes, you could try to go pawn grabbing over here, but now, well, your pawns are doubled up and they're not going to be moving fast at all. This rook is already stopping them. These 2 passed pawns are going to win the game very easily. Okay, so in the game, black tries to play a little bit more accurately here and goes ahead and plays rook to b8 check. This king now needs to walk a fine line, right? Don't walk the plank, don't kill yourself, but definitely walk on a fine line here. We got to defend the b4 pawn, simple chess, only one square to go to. King a5 and king to d5, rook to d3 check. I do want to point out here for those beginners watching, whenever you go rook a8 check, the only thing you're doing is helping your opponent out. The king obviously does not want to be here, he wants to be behind the pawns to push. So when you just keep randomly checking, you're only helping your opponent bring their pieces to the right square. And after king b3, no more checks, and we know what's happening next. Passed pawns must be pushed. This is definitely a better position here for white, as now there is no more checks. Alright, back to the game over here. King a5, king to d5. This is a little bit more scary, as now there is a perpetual check, but if you're not paying attention, I don't know, let's just say, try to go pawn grabbing over here. Uh-oh. Now rook a8 check, just go back and forth. White's not going to be too happy here, because they have to give up a pawn, or black will just keep doing these perpetual checks. Okay, so rook to d3 check, kicking the king away. The king needs to be careful because, well, we could just take this pawn on d6. King c4, free money's free money. Rook takes on d6. Rook takes on b4. Incorrect. White to move and win. What do you play here to simplify the position and go into an easy king and pawn endgame? This should be part of your endgame strategy basic techniques. Very easy tactic here. Alright, hopefully you said it already. It's just as simple. Rook to d4 check. Remember, checks, captures, and threats. Rook d4 check gets played. King takes, and this is easily winning because, well, we have access for our pawn to go ahead and run forward here, and this king is just going to be blocked off because, well, I know what opposition is, and hopefully you do too. Black tried f5. Passed pawns must be pushed, but here, fine endgame technique by Morphy here. Goes ahead and plays pawn to f4, cutting off this king and not letting the pawns get any closer. Alright, king e3. There we go. Passed pawns must be pushed. a5. King f2. Of course, taking this pawn would just be in the way. We really want to get to this pawn so that this pawn can get queened first. a6. King takes. a7. h3. Queen. Even in check. Didn't really need it, but it definitely doesn't hurt. Game over. King g1 and queen f3, and the game was over. Here, Daniel goes ahead and resigns. For those of you, again, who are not too sure about what's going to be happening here, there's a very easy technique here for white to win the chess game. In fact, here it's even giving full checkmates for this. I assume if you're playing black, you try to play something like h2 here, and now you have that forced checkmate, or just good endgame technique here. Queen g3 check, and now if you go king h1, well, you make the game even easier on yourself. Queen f2, can't move over here. h4, and now check and mate. The only other way to play was to go ahead and run to f1, and as you can guess, this is just as bad. Queen takes on h2, and, well, all you're going to do is run your king in closer and get the deadly kiss checkmate, because we control the squares here. So, for instance, king e1, we'll go ahead and go to c3. I guess now, if we move any closer, we're going to do that, so let's go h4. King d3, your king can run from one more square. King e3, h3, and it's game over with queen f2 for check and mate. Well, hope you guys enjoyed this one. Remember, the easiest endgames to win are king and pawn endgames. With that being said, practice your king and pawn endgames. We'll see you in the next video.